Good morrow, fellow humans. My name is Sean and I am obsessed with infinity. So join me as I attempt to unpick the infinities of what is.
It was 2 days after Christmas 1944, and I was in command of a searchlight unit in central Belgium as part of the Brussels defence layout. The weather at the time was atrocious, with persistent heavy snow on the ground, making it difficult for searchlight crews to maintain the required state of readiness that was needed at all times. The purpose in hand for me and my 5-man crew was to maintain a constant searchlight beacon in the sky during the hours of darkness in conjunction with similar sites all the way from the Channel coast deep into Germany, forming a dual carriageway for the Allied planes in and out of their bombing missions. The German High Command had just mounted their final offensive of the war in a last desperate attempt to halt the Allied advance into their country. By this stage of the war, there were few active enemy planes flying, but there was the odd rogue fighter to be aware of. And so it was that around 22:15 p.m. in the evening of the 27th of December, the searchlight site was attacked by a low-flying aircraft with cannon fire which put out of action one searchlight projector and one generator and shattered both power cables servicing the searchlights, thereby completely disabling the complex. The 2 soldiers operating the equipment at the time were wounded, and the operations tent was riddled with cannon shells and splinters. It was vital that the site be restored to full operation as quickly as possible.
History is fraught with such stories, both successful and not so. But for us, this story might turn out to be more than a mere tale of soldiers following orders, since, as Jim himself recalled, that particular episode was dense with many complex and variable facets.
The surprise element of the attack and the danger of induced panic, the transformation from bright searchlight exposure to complete and utter darkness, the urgent need to attend to the wounded colleagues, the overriding pressure to get the site up and running again, the need through positive leadership to reassure the local populace that the military were in control of the situation, the minute-to-minute minutiae requiring attention. And although the 2 wounded men had to be removed for medical attention, reducing the complement from 6 men to 4, a reorganized site schedule was implemented to full operational standard in record time.
Jim was only 22 at the time, the youngest in his unit by several years. But as his field commander later recalled, Jim's response to the emergency displayed, quote, an enthusiasm and initiative in excess of that which can be normally expected from a junior non-commissioned officer, end quote. And it was for this that Jim was awarded the Belgian Croix de Guerre with Palm. But were there hidden factors that led to Jim's response? At what point can it be said that Jim's intent of free will took over, allowing this heroic character to shine through, capable of feats above and beyond? In those split-second moments of noise, fear and confusion, Jim was seen to make a series of self-directed decisions and act upon them. And though he firmly believed that his service accolade was not just the honour of one man, but of an entire crew, these were nonetheless choices of his own making, a fact that he could never rightly be robbed of. However, beneath the very human story is another, which, for our purposes, must be considered. This is the story revealed within the biological makeup of his brain and body, where a complex of predetermined factors influenced all that we attribute to Jim and his heroic efforts. Factors such as his personality type, determined by a culmination of life experiences and his genetic makeup. His state of mind, determined by the chemical reactions of stress hormones, blood sugar, adrenaline, and more, each a reaction to the cause of past events, be that the amount or quality of food he had eaten, the amount or quality of sleep, the level of stress the mind was under, and so on, into infinity. Everything involved in making those decisions was based on a series of past events that not only set up Jim's person, but also led to the fact that he was in this location and situation in the first place. So that at this very instant in time, all variables were set and decided as a result of a chain of events stretching back well before his birth. Events traceable to the beginning of the universe itself, as so clearly intuited by the 17th century philosopher Baruch Spinoza. Quote, "In the mind, there is no absolute free will, but the mind is determined to wish this or that by a cause, which has also been determined by another cause, and this last by another cause, and so on into infinity." End quote. Thus, this chain of events is one and the same as the chain of events that have been shifting energies within the infinite, infinitely. But with all this said, these were still his decisions. No puppet master could ever be held responsible for his actions. So which is it? Do we have tangible control over our choices or not? As I see it, the question has now shifted from what is a decision to what is a decision maker. Are we the sum of our parts and thus a silent passenger in the universe? Or are we independent and whole, individual, with minds capable of shaping our world? This is where theorists have begun to look towards the uncertainties of quantum mechanics in the hope that we might rectify this conflict with a gut feeling, though it's hardly made things any easier. Theorists, troubled by the conflict, have begun seriously considering the validity of multiverse theories, such as many worlds offered by physicist Hugh Everett in 1957. The way Everett's broader perspective might hope to resolve the issue is through the emergence of an infinite count of parallel universes, where every possible effect to any initial cause happens in some parallel dimension. In the case of our soldier's tale, in some other parallel universe, he instead found himself overwhelmed by the noise and destruction and crumbled into a scatter of nerves, hindering the much-needed repairs, resulting in yet another reign of even more devastating attacks. Though in a world of infinite probabilities, scenarios are rarely split 50-50. Since if we head just a few universes over, our soldier, riding upon an entirely different wave of events, was instead born in another country, leading to an alternate history where Jim was the rogue fighter who, on that cold Christmas evening, gunned down the searchlights. The argument as to whether this wave of potentiality allows for an infinite or finite series of universes is still argued among the multiverse theorists. But even if finite, it could still unfold along such unpredictable lines that this same rabbit hole could end upon a scene where our soldier is a pink, furry, self-aware rock moss that spends its entire life manipulating translucent echoes of beings from alternate dimensions through the power of song, whilst these same echoes run about his mossy pink rock bed in the belief that they are in fact in control of their own decisions. Dodging paradoxes, a new kind of fun. But is this still Jim? And if not, is an identical Jim that chose red over blue, left over right, or any other insignificant choice our Jim? Now granted, this may be an intentional attempt to push the many worlds argument into the realms of reductio ad absurdum, but to be fair to Everett, the existence of our day-to-day reality is just as much of an impossibly ludicrous outcome for the universe to take as is any story of Soldier Pink Moss. Since, in an infinite universe with infinite probabilities, the possibility of any scenario occurring might just be infinitely probable. In other words, wacky stuff like this could be happening all the time. What the multiverse theory does offer us, however, is a theory that, though still counterintuitive, allows for a tangible hold over our destiny. Sure, another version of you may take that different path, but our linear, time-bound consciousness still holds at least some independence within the universe. I mean, I would hope so. After all, this is nothing short of our ego at stake here. Though, if history is anything to go by, ego might not be the best guiding star, considering that our ego has been taking hits of this nature for thousands of years. First was the uncomfortable discovery that, in counter to the endless proclamations of our so-called wise men, the Earth was not at the centre of the universe. There we were, one of many drifting around our magnanimous star. But then did we go on to discover that not even this golden heavenly sphere held any position of priority within the cosmos. Not our solar system, our galaxy, and now not even our universe, and possibly not even ourselves. Because why should our perspective of self be anything different? Why should we have freedom through a force of will, whereas other living entities, such as plants, don't? This is where Western philosophy seems to have tied one hand behind its back, as Western philosophy is centred on the concept of facts, what's referred to as the principle of bivalence, where one truth will always be present, and any contradiction to that fact must either disprove the initial fact or be proven false itself due to its contradiction with the proven fact. Eastern philosophy has historically been somewhat more tolerant towards contradiction. Two things can contradict one another whilst still being equally true. A picture that seems to resonate with what's happening here. Because due to our own experience, we each know firsthand that Jim was aware of his existence. His reality and observations are indeed valid. He alone experienced thought and emotion and made decisions based on these. And more importantly, he also experienced all the repercussions, good and bad. All this happens, unfolding along a private perspective of linear time. But neither Jim nor ourselves are simple, independent travellers of the universe, because equally, we are the universe. Our story, physical makeup, choices, and linear experience of time all exist. It's just that their independence can only be appreciated from within a space-time locked perspective. A perspective somewhat like looking out of a window. What one sees from the window is real, even though the perspective from outside of the house encompasses so much more. The point is that this additional truth, beyond our frame, never has to detract from the truth behind the window's limited perspective. Another simile would be the shape of the woodcutter's wedge. From its profile, it appears triangular, from above rectangular, and from behind it appears circular. But though each perspective may seem at first contradictory, it's evident that when we appreciate things from broader perspectives, we understand each frame in relation to the other. The problem we encounter with the concept of free will is that it suggests freedom, an idea that considers consciousness independent from all external influence. But of course it's not. As consciousness is not only tied to its influences, it is emergent through them. A trail of cause and effect that is never-ending, and as such, there will never be any outside influence that could impose itself upon the individual, since the individual and environment are at one, evolving together through time. Just as the individual is influenced by the evolution of the environment, so is the environment influenced by the evolution of the individual. But where does all this leave our understanding of time? What now seems to be apparent is that regardless of whether or not we live in a reality determined by a non-changing block of time, free will shall only ever be appreciated as a localized perspective, much the same as Einstein's relativistic now. Because even if free will is a trait of the universe that is ultimately real, it cannot be considered any more or less independent from the cosmos than is either space or time. Thus, we cannot rely on the validity of free will as an informant on the nature of time. However, it highlights that we will be hard-pressed to escape the bafflement as long as the dichotomy between conscious and non-conscious time remains tangled. And really, that's the big one, isn't it? To know what separates our experience from the time that persists purely for itself. After 800 million years of evolution, it seems inconceivable to think that we might one day learn which of nature's cycles were responsible for shaping the temporality of our consciousness, because all we see is a dense tapestry, a harmony of systems collectively tied to the chance rhythms of celestial tides and molecular clockwork. From the circadian rhythms of beating hearts, pumping lungs, and neuronal oscillators, down to the cycles hidden within our atoms, a shared tempo of life, unitedly governing our every aspect of being. And so it can be more than a little tricky to know where to start. One factor that does appear pertinent is the mental record of time's passing, a play of reflection and memory that demands the past gone and the present both here and now. This influence, above any other, is what really convinces us of time's actuality. Though witless perceptions are easily exposed, as our experience of time is far from clockwork. In the hands of an experiencer, time changes from one beat to the next. At once, time is like punk rock, impulsive, frantic, over before it's begun. And in the next, reflective and brooding, like a slow-opening prog rock juggernaut that melts minutes into eternities. When we're asleep, time interjects little more than a performance of John Cage's 433, but never is time for the experiencer like the rigid tick of a metronome. Time might dance, but it doesn't tick. As Lewis Carroll's Mad Hatter put it, I dare say you've never even spoke to time. Perhaps not, Alice cautiously replied. But I know I have to beat time when I learn music. Ah! That accounts for it, said the Hatter. He won't stand beating. What all of this clarifies is that just as we fail to host any ultimate experience of sight, hearing, or touch, so must we host an imperfect experience of time. For a time that is synonymous with experience shall always presume a neurological influence. But behind this reductive materialism lies the more profound hidden question. Has the brain evolved to sense time, or has the brain evolved to interpret a reality that is simply other, generating the time we experience as a byproduct? And curiously, this then brings us back to our earlier idea of a universe without consciousness. For if there is no experiencer capable of determining a now from then, can we still say that time passes? Beyond consciousness, does the arrow of time always follow its linear path? Is there a universal present that persists beyond that which is relevant to the individual? There is a lot in this thought, and it may take some unpacking. Though the way I would like to do this is by first determining what the self is. This alone will take up much of our journey together. But then, and only then, shall we be capable of considering the temporality of consciousness, which will hopefully give us reason to dare a retake on the question of time itself.
Good morrow, fellow humans. So happy to share this time with you again. Welcome back. Just wanted to do a quick shout out to the Lowe family this week. They allowed me to use Jim's story, which added an element of humanity to the story that we were trying to unfold, and I think that was a really helpful thing. So hopefully we did it justice. Special shout out to Keith Lowe, who is my father-in-law, and he did the reading. He's also Jim's nephew. So thank you very much to you, Keith. Next week is our full chapters episode. So what we do with the full chapters episode is we take the weekly episodes that have unfolded throughout the week, throughout the month, and put them back together in their uninterrupted form. That is so that if you are following that playlist on our YouTube channel, you can experience the Infinite Now stories more of an audiobook fashion. So go over there, check that out, see if it's something that interests you. Otherwise, much love, and I hope you have a great week. All right, bye.